The Penn State Nittany Lions take on the Boise State Broncos in the Fiesta Bowl. Penn State is favored by 10.5 points to win this football game, which kicks off New Year's Eve. It is the first of the 4 College Football Playoff Quarterfinal matchups. And while Boise State is being listed by many as a quote-unquote easy task, I don't think that's the case at all. I think that Boise State, with the good coaching staff they have, an extra week to rest and to prepare, and with the running back, the unicorn, the legend, the Heisman runner-up in Ashton Jeanty, who has 2,497 yards, 29 rushing touchdowns, and 7.3 yards per carry, I think that Boise State can give Penn State some issues and present some challenges. The Nittany Lions are favored by ESPN's FPI to win. They're given a 65% chance to win this matchup, and the line opened up at 11. As I already mentioned, it's traveled down to 10.5. Do me a favor, if you may, before we begin this analysis and I give you my preview and talk about this game. If you can like the video, if you can subscribe to the channel as well and hit the notification bell so that you can get notified when I release new content, when I release the other preview videos for the quarterfinals, and also when we go live during the week, and also go live to do play-by-play and color commentary during the quarterfinal games, you'll get notified if you hit the notification bell for all of those things. Also, comment your thoughts on this game down in the comment section below, your prediction, and also any thoughts you have, a preview, a mini preview, if you wish. And share this video around to other college football fans who love the sport and are passionate about it. And last but certainly not least, join the Discord server via the link in the description or down below in the pinned comment. And if you want to donate to the channel to support the work that I do here, you can make a purchase on my merchandise store or sign up as a paid member of the Patreon page. The links to those are in the description or down below in the pinned comment. Or you can send a super chat via YouTube in the comment section. But let's dive into this game and talk about it. And first and foremost, I think it's best to start with critical matchups here. Matchups that can make or break the game, even in a scenario where one team is favored by 10.5 points, which is pretty massive. Typically, when a team is favored by that much, it's pretty clear to Vegas who the winner is or is going to be. Doesn't mean it's a guarantee because Vegas gets some things wrong, but you understand what I mean in the sense that Vegas doesn't like to lose, and they don't lose that often. That's why they're still in business, and that's why they're called Vegas. Penn State's defensive line, their linebacker core, and their defensive back room, their defense, specifically their rushing defense, but their defense overall, because I think they'll have to have all hands on deck against this Boise State rushing offense. With running back Ashton Jeanty, their tight ends and their offensive linemen blocking up front for Jeanty, I think this is going to be a very fascinating matchup here to watch. And for Penn State, they have not faced a rushing offense of this caliber all season long. Boise State, talk about something that is pretty remarkable here. Boise State might have the second best offensive line that Penn State's played all season long. I don't know if it's better than Ohio State's O-line when Ohio State played Penn State. I don't know if it's better than USC's or better than West Virginia's, but Boise State's offensive line grades out at a very high level, and part of that is due to Ashton Jeanty and the success that he's having, but also there's a reason why Ashton Jeanty sometimes does have the long runs that he does. Sometimes he makes them happen on his own, other times his line blocks up front pretty well for him. So this is matchup A, in my mind, to pay attention to. Penn State's rushing defense and Tom Allen and players like Abdul Carter, Tony Rojas, and Kobe King, the linebackers. Are they able to fill up the gaps, plug up the gaps? And if so, can they stop Jeanty? Can they tackle him? And then for Boise State, you're talking about Ashton Jeanty. You're talking about that team and an offensive line that is one of the best in the group of 5 and maybe one of the best in all of college football, to be honest. Matchup B, I believe, is Penn State's offense. Quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, offensive line. But really, it's their passing offense against Boise State's pass rush. Boise State this year is one of the leaders nationally in sacks, and they have a few X-factor players on the defense. They have one of the better D-lines in the group of five, perhaps the best D-line in the G5. They have 51 sacks. 51 sacks on the year. Jaden Virgin Morgan, defensive end, and Ahmed Hassanian, the other defensive end, combined for 18.5 of those sacks. Virgin Morgan has 10, Hassanian has 8.5, and they both have a fumble recovery each, and Virgin Morgan has a forced fumble. This Boise State pass rush is vicious, and Penn State's interior O-line is really good. Their tackles are great in run blocking, but something I've noticed with them is against SMU, their pass protection was a little bit iffy. Against Ohio State at times, their pass protection was iffy. And against Oregon, even as the game went on, there were moments where Oregon was able to get through. So good pass rushes, good quality players on the defensive line, especially at edge, have been able to get to Drew Allar and sack him. And Allar has helped compensate for his tackle room with his mobility and his ability to escape the pocket and really scramble, I would say, forward, not just maneuver out of the pocket and sprint off to the side and then go down the sidelines, but just go straight up the middle through the gaps that the linebackers aren't covering because, well, they're not blitzing when he does this. Otherwise, he throws it away or takes the hit. And he goes down and gets anywhere from really 5 to 10 yards on many of those improvised runs from the pocket. So how do Tyler Warren? He didn't have a very explosive game against SMU. Does he get the hot hand? Does he have a quick start? Does Allar have a good game against what is going to be the weakest secondary he will face in the college football playoff? And how do Nolan Rucci and how does Drew Shelton, the tackles, how do they perform against, again, these Boise State X-Factor players like Jaden Virgin Morgan and Ahmed Hassanian off of the edge? And also Braxton Felly at defensive tackle, 5.5 sacks. Max Stedge, a defensive end, 2.5 sacks. Sheldon Newton, the nose tackle, has 2 sacks. And Herbert Gums, another nose tackle, has 1.5 sacks. So this defensive line is very productive. Linebackers and safeties are involved too in the pass rush. So maybe on blitzes, how does Andy Kolnicki take advantage when Boise State wants to send pressure? And for the wide receivers, are the receivers able to, against a weaker secondary, get open more quickly so that if Boise State's pass rush is getting to Allar, maybe he can make him pay through the air, maybe on an explosive play that has been a rarity for Penn State ever since they started playing Big Ten teams and not out-of-conference teams, G5 teams, or West Virginia, where Harrison Wallace had his best game. Let's talk about these offenses here. I think for Penn State, they're better at quarterback, they're better at tight end, they're superior at guard. Areas where I have questions in regards to I don't know exactly who's better would be center. I think that Nick Dawkins is a wonderful center, by the way, for Penn State. That's not the point. The point is Boise State, as I've already mentioned, has a really good offensive line. Jeanty makes a lot of the runs on his own, but the offensive line also does help him, and it also helps protect Matto Madsen, the quarterback for Boise State, who's only taken 10 sacks on the year. Malachi Nelson, the backup's taken 2. So they protect their quarterbacks, the Broncos do. And I think that Boise State, their offensive line, Cage Casey, Ben Dooley, Zach Holmes, Tyler Keenath, and Hall Schmidt, that's from left tackle, left guard, center, right guard, right tackle in that order, in the order we'll be using for Penn State's O-line as well. They're a good unit, and I think that Zach Holmes is a wonderful center. Same with Nick Dawkins, and Penn State's O-line, Drew Shelton, Olivega Ione, Nick Dawkins, Sal Wormley, and Anthony Donko. But Anthony Donko right now is hurt, so Nolan Rucci is substituting in for him. With Donko in, that was one of the best O-lines in the country, and I think it's continued with Nolan Rucci. But Donko was a really good player. I think there is somewhat of a drop-off still, even though Rucci has filled in rather nicely for him. And I look at these offenses here, and Boise State's is very productive. You know, they're scoring 37.7 points per game, averaging 0.538 points per play. A lot of that is due to Jeanty, but also their quarterback, Matto Madsen, has 22 passing touchdowns, 3 interceptions, 2,714 passing yards with a 143.7 passer rating, and he also has a 73.7 QBR, which is 26th. Cameron Camper, former Indiana wide receiver, leads the Broncos in receiving yards with 837. I do think that Boise State's Prince Strachan, Cameron Camper, Latrell Caples is superior to Penn State's Harrison Wallace III, Julian Fleming, and Liam Clifford. Not by much, but still a better wide receiver room. Going back to Penn State, I do think that Warren's better than anything Boise State has at tight end. I like Drew Allar over Madsen. I do like Boise State's tackles slightly. I think they provide a better pass protection. But overall, Boise State's played a pretty weak strength of schedule. They haven't played anyone like Penn State for the whole year. And that includes Oregon, by the way, because when they played Oregon, Oregon was a much weaker team than they are right now. I think this version of Penn State, I will say, probably beats that version of Oregon if they were to face off. That's not how college football works. It's very speculative, I know, but that's my opinion. I think that when Boise State played Oregon, they kind of caught them in a weak part of the year. And after that game, Oregon woke up, and they've been not a perfect team, but a different team, a much better team since then. You look at these defenses here. Penn State's defense has had some issues this season, but they're only issues if the expectation is for them to be the number one defense in the country. I mean, I think Dennis-Sutton, Zane Durant, Dvon J. Thomas, and Abdul Carter. Abdul Carter has 11 sacks and 2 forced fumbles on the year. I think that makes up probably the nation's second best D-line, only behind Michigan. And part of the reason why you don't see Penn State dominate in rushing defense per se, you see it in scoring defense. You only allow 15.9 points per game, 5th. 0.249 points per play, 5th. And they only allow 4.4 opponent yards per play, also 5th. And they're also 5th in yards per game, allowing 280. Much better than Boise State, who's outside the top 25 in literally all of those categories. And in the case of yards per play and yards per game, they're outside of the top 50. But the reason why they're not top 2 in rushing defense or top 5, whereas they're 6th in allowing 100.5 rush yards per game, 9th in opponent yards per carry, allowing 3.1, is because they've had some issues at linebacker. You know, Tony Rojas has received a pretty low grade for run defense, and I've noticed that Penn State's linebackers, safeties, and corners, when a running back gets through the D-line, which it's hard for the D-line to do everything. They need the help of the linebackers and the DBs, that Penn State sometimes struggled at tackling as well. Boise State, their defensive coordinator is Eric Chenander, by the way, familiar name for many on College Football with Sam, as he was Nebraska's former defensive coordinator. I think that he's commanding a pretty good defense for a group of 5 level, but overall, their D-line is still not at the caliber of Penn State's. Their linebacker room, I do believe that Marco Nataraini and Andrew Simpson are very competent, and I think they're pretty close to Tony Rojas and Kobe King. I would lean Penn State at linebacker over Boise State if I had to make a choice, but I think it's pretty close. However, I do think, again, Dennis-Sutton, Zane Durant, Dvon J. Thomas, Abdul Carter. They also got Amin Vanover. They have Smith Vilbert and Alonzo Ford Jr., others in that defensive line. I think they're deeper and have a higher ceiling than Ahmed Hassanian, Herbert Gums, Sheldon Newton, Braxton Felly, and Jaden Virgin Morgan. And then in the secondary, Boise State's passing defense is not good. I think that Amarion McCoy, Jeremiah Irby, Asai Oladipo, Ty Benefield, and Alexander Tubner, while there's some talent there, I think that ultimately it's an underperforming unit. It's part of the cost of having Chenander as your defensive coordinator. I think that Jalen Kimber, Jalen Reed, Zakee Wheatley, A.J. Harrison, Cam Miller in the secondary for Penn State are much better. And overall, Penn State does have a better defense. Looking at some other important factors, I believe that Penn State's line of scrimmage is superior. Special teams is a bit of a push here. I could go either way. In terms of blue chip ratio, recruiting, your roster talent from what high school recruiting classes say, it's easy to pick Penn State there. And I think even when you look at like the eye test, for example, and how this roster is doing against certain competition, I think Penn State has the much better roster here. When looking at the broad team comparison from a perspective of power ratings, Penn State's favored by 7.5 points to beat Boise by FPI, favored to beat Boise by 9.5 points per S&P Plus, and by my potential power index, they're favored to beat Boise State by 18 points. I just took the FPI and S&P Plus numbers, and then I subtracted 2 as Penn State's traveling 2 time zones to the Mountain Time Zone to play in Arizona, where Boise State's in that time zone, so I didn't subtract any points from them. And then for my potential power index, I did something similar. So Penn State's supposed to win this game, and they're supposed to win this game comfortably, especially per S&P Plus and my potential power index, where they're favored to win by 2 to 3 scores, respectively. Penn State, from a dominance angle, has a points per play margin of 0.259, which means for every one of their plays compared to every one of their opponent's plays, they outscore their opponent on average by 0.259 points per play. They have an expected points added margin of 0.204, so they do a very good job of getting down the field in terms of a field position basis. And by field position, I don't just mean special teams, I mean like driving. They more often get to the end zone or get into the red zone than their opponents do on them. Boise State's points per play margin is 0.210. It's one of the best, if not the best, in the G5 outside of Army. And then their expected points added margin is 0.085. Continuing on, Penn State's played the 27th toughest strength of schedule. They're ranked 8th in FPI, and their game control rank is 13th. Boise State has faced the 81st strength of schedule. They're 24th in FPI, and they're 15th in game control. FPI is the football power index. It's just a computer ranking of how good a team is and how Team A would be favored over Team B in a neutral field. Game control is looking at each team's schedule and deciding how many other teams would perform better than them given their strength of schedule. So Penn State would be expected to perform at a higher level with Boise State's schedule than Boise State has with their own. So from game control's perspective, Penn State, while being underperforming probably across the whole of college football, is viewed as better than Boise State and achieving more at a higher level than Boise State is. I do think that Penn State has the coaching edge here, and it's pretty massive. I think they have the better head coach, better offensive coordinator, better defensive coordinator, and better strength and conditioning coach. You know, for Boise State, I like Spencer Danielson. I do think the job that he's done there is excellent. You know, Ashton Jeanty is a player who was highly desired in the transfer portal, to say the least. He stayed home. He hired Dirk Coder to be his offensive coordinator, Nate Potter as well, and then got the defense Eric Chenander and Tyler Stockton. So he built a new staff after being hired last year in an interim capacity, and he's done well. Boise State's ranked in the top 10. They won the Mountain West, and their only loss was by a field goal to right now the number 1 team in the country, who's 13-0. But I think that it's different to win at Boise State than it is at Penn State, especially given the strength of schedule disparity. It's close. I mean, I've criticized James Franklin before, and I like Spencer Danielson, but I need to see Boise State play Penn State very competitively, you know, to get a larger sample size of how they do against good Power 4 opponents before I can say that Boise State is doing anything that's special nationally, not just special at a Group of 5 level. That's not me hating. I like Boise State, but I think Penn State has the better coaching staff, better head coach, better offensive coordinator in Nicole Nicky, and also better defensive coordinator in Tom Allen, and their strength and conditioning is up there nationally. My pick in this matchup is Penn State covers and that Penn State wins. My model, of course, has them favored by 18 points. I think they win 38-17. That's my score prediction here. I do think Jeanty will finish the game with over 100 yards. I think he will have at least 1 rushing touchdown, maybe 2. I think early, with Boise State coming off of the bye, they have a good coaching staff, and they do have some areas that Penn State's unfamiliar with, such as the fact that Boise State may have the best pass rush that Penn State's played all season long. They definitely have the best running back Penn State's played all season long, but they also have a much weaker secondary than the average team Penn State's played in Big Ten competition. And Matt O'Madson's a very limited QB. So I imagine as the game progresses and as Penn State adjusts, especially out of the half, they're one of the best teams when it comes to second half adjustments, one of the best second half teams in all of college football, maybe the best. I think they'll put Boise State away. It'll be a little high scoring, competitive for a quarter, maybe for a half. After that, I don't think it will be very competitive. I think it will be clear entering half who the better team is. So I'm picking Penn State to win 38-17, and they will move on to play in the Orange Bowl. Yeah, they'll move on to play in the Orange Bowl against the winner of the Sugar Bowl, either Notre Dame or Georgia. So go Boise State Broncos, go Penn State Nittany Lions. I hope this is a great game. I wish the best for your fan bases, and may the best team win. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel, and also hit that notification bell so that way you can get notified when new content from College Football with Sam drops. I appreciate you very much, and also share the video around to others who you know enjoy the sport of college football and love it as I do and as you do, and comment your thoughts down below so that we can have a conversation, because I want to know what you are thinking. And join our Discord server where we talk college football 24/7 via the link in the description or down below in the pinned comment. Thank you to my Heisman Patreon members, Crash2488, Brascal Rascal, and Carlo OH. Thank you to my All-American Patreon members, Chris Lane, Ismar, and Tyler Nye. And thank you to my All-Conference members, John Lynn, Roaming Gnome, Matthew Sale, Austin Christmas, Joshua Jorgensen, and Will Loftus. Make sure to check out my merchandise store and or Patreon page, or super chat down in the comment section below to support the channel. The Patreon page and merchandise store links are in the description or down below in the pinned comment. I hope you have a wonderful day. It is December, so Merry Christmas and also Happy New Year. I will see you guys soon.